Something just happened in the global economy that could change everything, and almost nobody is talking about it yet. In the last 24 hours, 20 million barrels of oil supply disappeared. $2 trillion was erased from stock futures before markets even opened. Japan's market crashed 6% overnight. And the Kremlin just issued a chilling warning. The end of the world may be upon us. Now that might sound dramatic until you look at the numbers, because the world just experienced the largest oil supply shock in human history. 20 million barrels per day gone. To understand how insane that is, the Iranian Revolution removed 5.5 million barrels. The Yom Kippur War removed 4.5 million. The Gulf War removed 4.3 million. The Iran-Iraq War removed 4 million. The Russia-Ukraine invasion removed 2 million. Combined, those 5 historic crises removed less oil than what just disappeared today. But here's the part that should really make you pause, because while the media is showing you oil prices, they're not showing you this. The United States just deployed E-6B nuclear command aircraft to the Middle East. These are known as Doomsday planes. They are designed to survive nuclear war. They're the aircraft that transmit nuclear launch orders to submarines, and there are only 16 of them on Earth. You don't deploy Doomsday planes for a routine conflict. You deploy them when the nuclear option might just be on the table. Now, does that mean nuclear war is about to start? No, but it does mean something very serious. The global system just entered a completely new level of risk. And historically, when oil shocks hit the economy like this, the dominoes fall fast. Markets crash, central banks panic. And then comes the only tool they have left: money printing. Massive money printing. The kind that sends inflation through the roof. And there happens to be one asset that was created specifically for moments like this: Bitcoin. So today we're breaking down the largest oil supply shock in modern history, why it could trigger the next global financial crisis, and why chaos like this could send Bitcoin into its next major run, because the biggest crash in history may have just begun, or the biggest Bitcoin bull run ever. We have a massive show today. Prepare for Doomsday and hope for Valhalla.
This is a short-term disruption for the long-term gain.
Short-term pain for the long-term gain.
Short-term pain be for long-term gain.
We're going to have some short-term pain with long-term gain.
Short-term pay for a long-term gain.
Some short-term pain, yes, but we've got some long-term gain. Short-term spike for a long-term gain.
Some short-term pain for American consumers. We may have to deal with that in the short term.
Short-term and temporary.
Temporary short-term pain.
It's going to suck in the short term.
Some short-term pain.
Yeah, I think you got the picture. It's just like 2 weeks to slow the curve or spread or whatever, but with bombs. The world is spinning out of control. Literally, the complete opposite of what was promised in this statement.
My honest guidance to those young men, and I think their concerns are very legitimate, but if you're worried about the world spinning out of control, if you're worried about a military draft, if you're worried about, God forbid, a world war, the best way to prevent it is to vote for Donald Trump. And I really believe that.
Speaking of draft, Carolyn Levitt doesn't rule out a draft.
Mothers out there are worried that we're going to have a draft, that they're going to see their sons get in and daughters get involved in this. What do you want to say about the president's plans for troops on the ground? As we know, it's been largely an air campaign up until now.
It has been, and it will continue to be, and President Trump wisely does not remove options off of the table. I know a lot of politicians like to do that quickly, but the president, as commander-in-chief, wants to continue to assess the success of this military operation. It's not part of the current plan right now, but the president, again, wisely keeps his options on the table.
Layoffs worse than the great financial crisis, gas about to hit $5, brink of World War III, looming recession, groceries and rent unaffordable, owning a home no longer possible, credit card debt at record highs, everything's a subscription now, AI taking everyone's jobs, mental health crisis, what even is the point anymore? The wars and spending never end. Just in, national debt on track to rise to 120% of GDP in 2036, per Axios. And here's a headline for you: Iraq has become a battleground for U.S. forces once again. All right, things are getting pretty intense on the geopolitical front, and honestly, it's starting to look like doomsday on two fronts right now, both military and economic. Let's start with this. The Kremlin just issued a pretty chilling warning, saying the end of the world is upon us. That statement came from Vladimir Putin's spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, who says the global system has entered what he calls a perfect storm after massive US and Israeli strikes on Iran. According to the Kremlin, the bigger issue isn't just the war, it's that international law itself has basically collapsed. Peskov even said he doesn't know what has replaced the global rules-based order because, in his words, it no longer exists. Now, at the same time, Putin has pledged unwavering support to Iran, backing the country's new supreme leader after the previous one was killed in the strikes. And while the geopolitical tension is exploding, so are the energy markets. Oil just surged past $100 a barrel for the first time in years. The reason? The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway that moves roughly 20% of the world's oil supply, is basically shut down. Iran's Revolutionary Guard is threatening to burn Western oil tankers that attempt to pass through, and right now hundreds of oil and LNG ships are literally sitting on both sides of the strait waiting to move. Markets felt it immediately. Brent crude spiked nearly 24%, with prices jumping 10% in a single minute, and then another 10% just minutes after that. That was one of the fastest oil spikes in modern history. The economic fallout is already spreading. European gas prices jumped 30% overnight, and G7 leaders are now holding emergency meetings to discuss releasing strategic oil reserves. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is warning the war is already spilling into Europe, saying rising energy costs, drone attacks, the trade disruptions are starting to hit Western economies. In other words, the conflict is no longer just a regional war. It's quickly turning into a global economic shock. And if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, energy markets, inflation, and the global economy could be about to face a massive stress test. Now let's get to the G7 arguably making the biggest mistake in energy market history.
You could see just the way that prices reacted over the last 4 or 5 hours, right? They opened early Asian morning. You saw prices surge 25%, oil Brent nearing $120. And then there was an FT report just out in the last hour or so saying that G7 members will be meeting later today, early U.S. morning, to discuss a potential joint release of the strategic oil reserves. And then prices kind of tapered a bit. You're still above $100 a barrel, which is huge, considering where we were just last week, around $70 for Brent. But I think that's what the market has been waiting for, right? They have been, when you hear the U.S. Energy Secretary talking about there's enough oil, it's not so much that, you know, there are some countries that aren't getting the deliveries that they need, especially in South and Southeast Asia. But in terms of oil in reserve and in strategic reserve, that's correct. There is a lot of oil available. It's just whether or not those strategic reserves would be tapped. And we heard last week Japanese refiners were pushing their government to try to go forward with tapping some of their reserves. But this sort of action by governments works best in chorus, which is why it makes sense that the FT is reporting that they're going to be discussing this. The U.S., according to the FT, is for that plan, along with 2 other G7 members, and we'll find out more later as that comes closer. But I think there is worry in the market that there is no end in sight for the what's happening in the Middle East, the war in Iran. And as long as there's no end in sight, the idea that the Strait of Hormuz, which is a vital waterway for 20% of seaborne oil and fuel products, that's going to remain shut. And that's going to cause a strain on the markets, prices, and consumers.
All right, so the G7 is out here trying to calm the oil market by floating reserve releases, tapping stockpiles, basically putting lipstick on the pig. And the market figured that out in about 4 hours. Oil ripped more than 20% overnight. The reserve headlines hit the wire, and yeah, prices pulled back a bit, but we're still up 12 to 15%. In other words, traders looked at the math and said, cute press conference, still a disaster. And they're right, because the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve Sounds big at around 411 million barrels until you realize it used to hold 727 million. And when the US drained 180 million barrels in 2022 to fight $90 oil, it barely gave consumers about 18 cents per gallon of relief. This crisis is way worse. Back then, Russian supply was getting rerouted. Tankers still moved. Alternatives existed. Now, the Strait of Hormuz, the most important energy choke point on Earth, is effectively frozen, not because of a formal blockade, but because insurers don't want to touch ships going through it. That means reserve releases don't solve the real problem. They do not reopen Hormuz. They do not restore shipping confidence. They do not end the war, and they do not fix a growing supply gap. So this is panic, not strategy. And while politicians try to spin it, the smart money is already moving towards real assets. Gold, silver, Bitcoin, because arithmetic doesn't care about government messaging. Now here's where it gets uglier. When oil goes up, everything goes up. Gas, food, shipping, construction, materials, everything. That means inflation comes roaring back. And if inflation comes back, the Fed might not be able to cut. They may even have to raise rates. Imagine. And if rates stay higher for longer, mortgage rates stay pinned. Housing affordability gets crushed. Layoffs start spreading, and suddenly this starts looking like the same sequence we saw in 2008. Oil shock, inflation, rate pressure, stock sell-off, layoffs, housing pain. Except this time the shock is bigger and faster. So yes, we are standing on the edge of something massive right now. And if this keeps escalating, the biggest buying opportunity of our lifetime could be forming. That's right, Bitcoin is on the precipice of something massive as well. There's 23 reasons Valhalla could be upon us. Look at the chart. Our time is nigh. We're about to bring it home and possibly deport Lindsey Graham. But before we do, look at our likes.
3 or 4 times, maybe. I gotta pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
Speaking of holding your own keys, if you're looking to reclaim your sovereignty, you're going to want to visit our friends over at the Bitcoin Way. If you're not running a node, you're not verifying your own transactions. You're relying on someone else. The Bitcoin Way will get your coins off the exchanges into cold storage and guide you step by step in setting up your own node. It's hands-on training from the masters of self-custody. And ask yourself, are they listening to your calls? Tracking every tap? The Bitcoin Way will help you choose a privacy phone, install a privacy operating system, and regain your digital sovereignty. And if you need location insurance, a Plan B residency is within reach. They'll guide you step by step into a Bitcoin-friendly community where sovereign individuals thrive. Visit thebitcoinway.com and book your free 30-minute consultation using that link in the show notes. Today's show is brought to you by Ledn. If you ever need cash but don't want to sell your Bitcoin, Ledn makes that possible. They're the global leader in Bitcoin-backed lending with $10 billion plus in loans issued since 2018 and a perfect record of protecting client assets. Why is a Ledn loan different? With custodied loans, your collateral is not lent out to generate yield. There are no credit checks. You can get funds in as little as 6 hours, no monthly payments, and you can repay anytime with 0 penalties. Plus, they publish proof of reserves every 6 months verified by a top accounting firm. Ledn gives Bitcoin holders a secure, transparent way to unlock liquidity without selling. Learn more at learn.ledn.io/simply. That's learn.ledn.io/simply.
States, you just wait to see what comes in the next 2 weeks.
The next 2 weeks, meaning what?
We're going to blow the hell out of these people. This regime is in a death row now. It is going to be on its knees. It's going to fall. And when it falls, we're going to have peace like no other time. We're going to have prosperity unlike anyone could ever imagine. Peace brings prosperity.
Let me say something about Senator Graham. There will be news coming out in the next couple of months about how he has profited financially off of money that came out of Ukraine, laundered through Latvia, and made its way into his bank account. And we're talking significant amounts of money. Department of Justice is looking at it.
All right, those are serious allegations leveled by former CIA officer Larry Johnson. We shall see.
No one gets more hot and bothered by bombing people than this disgusting lunatic. But wait, There is hope. Breaking Iranian officials are recommending that President Trump charge Lindsey Graham with high treason for colluding with a foreign country. I agree with them, and according to the comments on X, so do many Americans. And some of our allies in the Middle East as well. UAE billionaire Khalifa Hamad al-Habtoor just humiliatingly dismissed Senator Lindsey Graham in the most eloquent way possible. Quote, Senator Graham, you may be a senator in the U.S. Senate, but anyone who hears your statements might think you're a member of the Knesset because you defend a foreign country's interests more than you defend the interests of the American people themselves. We will not enter this war to serve the interests of others, nor will we sacrifice our sons in a conflict that could have been avoided through diplomacy and political solutions. We want peace and stability. We will not accept being forced down the path of war, nor will we accept being fuel for others' battles. And we are in an era of massive instability and uncertainty. And that is an environment in which Bitcoin is designed to thrive.
I would buy a ton of Bitcoin. If Bitcoin gets down around, 50,000 or less, if the market overshoots on the downside, I'm going to pack up the truck for Bitcoin or something like silver, because those are the things that you're going to want to own in a period of instability, gross instability in a whole lot of different ways, including the economy and the marketplace. So yes, there's a lot of caveats and a lot of ifs and a lot of probabilities, but as those probabilities start to pile up and it looks like more concretely, that's where we're going, that's where you really want to be. All the traditional tools that safe haven to get you through unstable periods.
I mean, that's cool to hear you talk about Bitcoin in that way, because you've always been sort of a little skeptical of Bitcoin. Is it just the fact that it's pulled down so much from its highs that you're interested at this point, or have your sort of opinions changed on it slightly?
No, my problem with Bitcoin, it's not really a problem. It's understanding what it is and where it's going. Not price, but actual function. Bitcoin is not replacing the US dollar. Bitcoin is competing with gold as a safe haven portfolio asset. That's why it behaves a lot like the NASDAQ. It's competing with the stock market or gold. So people look to Bitcoin as potentially since it has a relatively small market cap, there's as more and more people get interested for any reason, doesn't matter what it is, there's a lot of upside potential from Bitcoin. Even though it doesn't replace the dollar, it doesn't become the next big currency, it can still become a highly appreciative asset, a speculative asset, or a store of value asset, certainly. So if Bitcoin goes down with that level of price appreciation, the asymmetry works in your favor, because there are so many long run positives to owning Bitcoin. If we see Bitcoin at 20,000, you got to be buying every last thing that you can, every last bit you can get.
Why will Bitcoin fix the world? Because wars, corruption, inflation, taxes, and poverty all stem from the fact that we don't have sound money. Money that can preserve value. Money that preserves the value of our hard work. That's why we are where we are today. Opt out. And the possibility of World War III is higher than ever, which is probably a good time to visit our new sponsor, Sat123. Because when cell service dies, life doesn't have to. Sat123 hooks you up with real satellite phones, Starlink kits, and rugged off-grid internet that works anywhere. Mountains, ocean, middle of nowhere, it doesn't matter. If you care about preparedness, freedom, and staying connected when it actually counts, go to sat123.com. That's sat123.com, and don't forget to use promo code SIMPLY for 15% off. No signal? No problem. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Let us know what you think down below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and give us a pamp by sharing the Sound Money Gospel, and I'll catch you all next time. Love you guys. Peace.
If you prefer to go down with the ship, you.